To kickstart session 1, Setting New Priorities for Businesses, it's our honor to have Mr. Peter Becker, President and CEO of World Business Council for Sustainable Development, to be our keynote speaker. Although Mr. Becker is currently in Geneva, he has recorded a video presentation covering the topic of business leadership in times of transformation. Now, let's watch the video.
Dear members of the Business Environment Council, or BEC for short, dear friends in Hong Kong, I am Peter Becker, President and CEO of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, or WBCSD for short. It's a great pleasure to address the Business Environment Council Conference on Redefining Business Leadership for Green Growth today. WBCSD is a global CEO-led organization of over 200 leading businesses working together to accelerate the transition to a sustainable world. In Hong Kong, this includes our member companies, CLP Group, New World Development, and Jardine Matheson. BEC is part of our global network of 60+ organizations around the world. We've been working together to advance Hong Kong's sustainability efforts through various joint projects. Today, the topic on business leadership for green growth are crucial. The next 4 sessions today will focus on various important subjects, including the circular economy, connecting nature with business, embracing innovation in changing landscape, and pursuing climate readiness and transparency. All of these are very important for the future of Hong Kong and of the world. Climate change, nature loss, and inequality are 3 pressing global challenges our world is facing and need to be tackled together. Each of them, on its own, can endanger the safe operating space for humanity and the planet, as well as the license to operate for business. And if there's one thing that we've all learned from the COVID pandemic, is how interconnected these challenges are. To avoid dangerous, irreversible climate change, we must reach net zero emissions before 2050 and become nature positive by 2030. The longer we delay action at the pace and scale needed, the more complex and costly the impacts become, with disastrous effects on people and the planet. This 2021 is a critical year for business and governments to make commitments. As we accelerate our transition to a resilient, zero-carbon future, the private sector has an important role to play in Hong Kong and around the world in transitioning towards becoming nature positive and towards net zero emissions. Many businesses are stepping up and are already committed to decarbonizing their operations, scaling impacts across value chains. The business community is driving real collective action to tackle the climate emergency and to halt and reverse nature loss in the coming decade and beyond. Early this year at WBCSD, we launched our Vision 2050, Time to Transform, one of the most comprehensive, forward-looking and pragmatic reports to date. It was developed over the past 2 years by more than 40 global business leaders and a strong external review committee, building on the initial Vision 2050 report from 2010. What this report says is that we need a long-term vision that we can all rally behind. 9+ billion people living well within planetary boundaries by mid-century. Achieving this relatively simply worded vision requires a wholesale transformation of everything we've grown up with. Energy needs to decarbonize, materials need to go circular, food needs to be produced sustainably and equitably, and provide healthy diets. The concept of system transformation is crucial. In this report, we focus on 9 pathways of system transformation, written in an actionable format for business leaders around the world. It should influence the strategic business agenda for all of you in the coming decade. In Hong Kong and around the world, business has to play a leading role in the transformations toward our common vision for carbon neutrality, working together with governments, regulators, investors, and all people. More specifically, for companies in Hong Kong, work on climate, living spaces and mobility, and circular economy needs to be prioritized. For climate, this means achieving net zero, whereas Programs must now be integrated across business in every function to start driving action and transformation at every level, not just in the sustainability function. Supporting demand from consumers and investors for greater transparency on emissions and reduction targets across scope 1, 2, and 3, and turning net zero requirements into growth opportunities by becoming more resilient as a company and capitalizing on climate opportunities to grow and differentiate your company, your products and services against those of competitors. For the living spaces and mobility, this means finding a path for more people-centric built environment and mobility in Hong Kong while reducing the role of the car. Considering digital solutions to improve efficiency of public transit with on-demand solutions and creating a space of last-mile shared modes, and redesigning the built environment and the transport network with intermodal and multimodal hubs. For the circular economy, this means quantifying circular economy performance using tools such as the circular transition indicators we developed at WBCSD as a means to support policy development and target setting. I am confident that through your work on sustainability and under the leadership of BEC, business in Hong Kong will play a leading role in contributing to our vision for 2050, for a world in which 9+ billion people live well within the planetary boundaries. I want to end this short talk by thanking BEC for your work on exploring how enterprises can promote sustainable development and on facilitating Chinese businesses to contribute to the global sustainability development agenda with your member companies. We very much appreciate BEC's support and look forward to greater cooperation. I wish the conference a great success and look forward to hearing back from your decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Backer, for setting the scene for today's discussion. Before we start the panel discussion, please be reminded that audience can type in their questions through the Q&A box to the panel of speakers. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Simon Ng, Director of Policy and Research of BEC, as the moderator of this plenary. Simon, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning and welcome to the first panel discussion of today's conference. Joining me today, we have Mr. TK Chiang, Managing Director of CLP Power Hong Kong. Good morning, TK.
Good morning.
We also have Mrs. Margaret Brooke, CEO of Professional Property Services Limited. Welcome, Margaret. And last but not least, we have Mr. Kevin O'Brien, Chief Executive of Jardine Engineering Corporation. Welcome,
Good morning,
Kevin.
Simon. Good morning.
So we've just heard from Mr. Backer, and he talked about businesses' priorities, it's time to transform, and the challenges that we're facing. Now, I just want to remind everyone, for this panel discussion, we would like to identify new business risks and challenges and how we set new priorities and transformative pathways for the business sector in the long term. We also want to discuss business leadership and the qualities required for sustained success. So with that, I would like to start by asking each one of you maybe to say a few words about your company and the main business focus. What are the main sustainability risks faced by your company recently? And what are the key lessons you have learned from the global pandemic and also other long-standing problems such as climate change? Maybe I will start with TK.
Okay, thank you, Simon. I come from CLP Power. I think I'm sure most of you would know CLP Power is one of the utilities in Hong Kong, and we are now serving about 80% of the population in Hong Kong. We are a vertically integrated utility covering generation, transmission, distribution, and also our customer service. Now, our vision actually is to be the leading electricity utility in the Asia-Pacific region, from generation to the next. So basically, we are looking at a sustainable business, and we want to provide sustainable solution to our customer to create value to all the stakeholders. Now, I think it's not unexpected that one of the key sustainability risks is climate change. And being a utility, of course, we are emitting carbon during our generation activity. So it's always in our mind to work out how we can decarbonize ourselves. And now, to us, I think the lesson learned from this climate change is that government policy actually is key. A clear regulatory framework, a clear government policy will basically give us a clear roadmap so that we can take time and then do what we can do in order to meet the objective. If I can quote one example, starting from the early 2000s, actually we are working very hard on improving our air quality. And at that time, actually, we worked together with the government, and it takes time for us to do that. The first emission cap was imposed in 2010, and over the years, actually, we have been gradually reducing air quality, and it's becoming I would say quite good now. And in the coming future, obviously, is carbon, and we also need a clear government policy. Last year, the CE has announced the carbon neutrality target, which to us sets a clear direction for Hong Kong, and we will work very hard with the government. And actually, with this sustainable risk, we are also seeing CLB being a stakeholder in Hong Kong that is taking a bigger role, because if we can decarbonize electricity, actually we can help decarbonize other sectors in Hong Kong. Although electricity amounts to quite a major portion, but there are still other sectors that we need to help. Now, the second sustainability risk, I would say, is digitalization. Actually, this is related to COVID that you just mentioned, because I would say, fortunately, we started the journey of going to cloud in the mid-2010. And when the pandemic came, actually, we can then swiftly switch to work from home mode. Just within weeks, because we already, basically have our system in the cloud, we can ask more than 2,000 of our staff basically working from home without any impact, on our business operation. So to us, I think the lesson learned is we have to start early. There's no, it's always late if you kind of like, going for digitalization.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, TK. I think, definitely we will hear again the keywords like climate change, digitalization in our conversation. So Maggie, what about you? Can you share a little bit about your company and the challenges you're facing?
Yes. Professional Property Services, or generally as you can imagine it's called PPS, it's a specialist real estate consultancy based in Hong Kong. We've been here for a number of years now, providing a selected range of advisory services to clients across the Asia-Pacific region. These includes support for short, medium and long-term real estate requirements, interests or investments, and includes strategic development advice, market research, feasibility analysis, and realization of market potential. Over the past 2 years, I think we've been made to focus on exactly what we do provide in the way of services to people. I mean, people working from home has been quite an interesting procedure. But we've learned, I think, that the question of the need for daily office use is now becoming quite questionable amongst quite a lot of companies. A lot of people have got used to working from home and actually find it doesn't get in the way of what they do or the advice and direction that they provide to their staff. And the need for physical retail without omnichannel backup and support is now questionable, I think, and there's a lot of people looking at what alternatives they may do in the real estate world. There's also the importance of technology in all areas of the market now, not just where we used to see it in electronics and astronomics, or the various ways you used to use tech, and that was what tech was for. But now tech is for everything, and we'd all be quite difficult if we didn't have tech. And then perhaps, not unexpectedly, it's been mentioned several times already, the importance of dealing successfully with the risks of climate change and everything that goes with climate change, and the difficulties that it puts upon our clients, customers, and everybody we deal with.
Thank you, Maggie. Kevin, over to you, please. I think maybe not just from JEC's perspective, but maybe also from the group's perspective.
Yeah,
please.
okay, and I think that's very important. So JEC is 4,000 people, which is just 1% of the 400,000 people that work in the wider Jardine Matheson group around Asia, and in a variety of businesses with their own separate set of challenges. and not just challenges within the industry sector that they're in, but also within the different geographies that we're present in. So you go from property business as a huge energy user, or you go to the motors business with the challenges of the transition from the combustion engine to the electric vehicle, or you go to the retail business with the challenges and disruption that's coming from outside, and engineering, construction, hotels, and a number of other sectors. So the challenges for the group are plentiful, and it's a huge headcount of staff that we take care of and are responsible for taking care of our business every day right across Asia. In terms of the challenges, I think the challenges are quite obvious. The biggest one, aside from the sustainability challenge, the transformation and the disruption challenge is very much there. At different paces, challenging our businesses there. But if we look for our learning from what's happened with the current COVID pandemic situation, I think it's been a wake-up call to us all. And the wake-up call is, if we rewind pre-pandemic, we always saw in the movies, we saw in the headlines about what if these events happened. And now we're actually living amongst it, and we've seen the disruption it's caused to our daily business lives, whether they be in the business world or on a personal basis to the young children at school, etc. And I think the wake-up call is that the climate crisis is not going to knock on the door as quickly as COVID. It's a slow creep on us, and we have to take the action now. If we don't take the action now, then it will be too late. It's not just about solving the particular issue that we've had with the pandemic. And so for us, I think it's been the message of this is real, this is coming, and these things can happen. Whereas I think if we go back a couple of years, without the experience of the pandemic, then it was push it off for another day. And I don't think now, with the situation we're in, any of us will have that mindset. So there's been a big mindset shift in the boardroom.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Now, you mentioned mindset shift, and especially in the boardroom, and I think that's really important, and that ties in very well with my next question. Now, my next question is for Kevin and for TK. Now, since CLP and Jardine Matheson are members of WBCSD, does it actually give you, with their Vision 2050, an extra nudge to think about transformation, to try to facilitate the mindset shift? And if that's the case, how ready are you for the transformation? Have you started thinking about new priorities? And I think most important of all, how are you going to make sure that the mindset shift actually will come from senior management all the way down to frontline staff? Maybe I'll start with Kevin.
Okay, so I think the interesting thing with WBCSD's Vision 2050 is the alignment with our group's vision. And if you look at the living within the planetary restraints, and then you tie that in with our focus. We've got three key focus areas, which is climate action, it's social inclusion, and responsible consumption. So that's where, group level, we've decided to focus on. And if you look at the 9 pathways, within Vision 2050, our group is involved in business in each of the 9 pathways. And I think that if we look at membership at WBCSD, many of the people that we represent or we partner with, even just on this panel today, people we partner with are here in the room. So it brings us together as a network of senior management on a global basis to have the conversation and look at what we need to do. I think the important thing for us as a group now is, in the past, the conversation was happening within the operational business units. So the property business did what they needed to do and will continue to do what they need to do. But the conversation is also now happening at group level, and there's a push on the group level. And we now have the tools across the group to enable collaboration. So when we came up with our vision as what we wanted to do within the group, we couldn't engage with all 400,000 people, but there were 5,000 people engaged in the conversation about where should we focus on. And we have to focus on the engagement of the stakeholders in it, but we also need to have bold voices at the senior management level. Otherwise, you may end up with a very diluted, lowest common denominator type approach. And we need to be very careful of that. We need to be very clear as to what we need to achieve. And not forgetting that our business, has been around for close to 190 years. So it is not about short-term reward. It's very much about the long-term success of the business, and lots of our people spend their whole life working together with us. So how we respect those people and how we respect the future generations to want to come and work with our businesses, I think is really, really important. So I think there's a lot of alignment, and also the direction that is now put out by WBCSD and organizations like BEC helps us to engage as to how the whole business world needs to progress. So that's really from my side.
Well, excellent. And of course, that's the reason why we are putting up this conference, because it's not just about BEC members and some of the members who are maybe privileged to have access to those information and knowledge. It's all about sharing with the wider community and try to help them and inspire them to do the same. So TK, what about your story and what's your priority now?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I agree with Kevin that basically we have this alignment among the industry, in the transformation and also in addressing the climate change. In CLP, I think I would say we already started the transformation actually quite some time ago. I can give you an example. We have set our climate vision back in 2007. At that time, actually, I think we are, I would say, one of the first pioneer in setting such a vision. And we want to reduce our carbon intensity by more than 75%, by 2050. And actually, this climate vision, we have been reviewing it and tightening it over the years. And I think everything basically starts from the top. Now, within CLP, we have the value framework. One of the core values are include care for people, care for environment, and care for the community. And with this top-level direction, basically it aligns across the whole organization and gives us a direction to consider all the needs in the community among the different stakeholders. For example, last year we fulfilled the first decarbonization target from the government. We have increased the gas generation to about 50%. Actually, our carbon intensity was reduced by about 26% just in one single year. And that enable, as I said, the electricity sector to be decarbonized, and which can help to decarbonize other sectors. And another priority, again, Kevin also mentioned about transformation. And apart from so-called going to cloud, which is, I would say, one of the key infrastructure that we are now implementing, digitalization actually is a disruption. It's disrupting various industries. A lot of people may have heard about fintech, a lot of those different industries. But I think energy is no exception. Even energy sector, we are being disrupted. And when we talk about digitalization, I think the key message is it's not about technology. It's about new way of doing things. How do we basically adopt technology in order to improve our business operation, improve the service and products that we are providing to our customer. And this is how we're going to transform ourselves. We have set a target to become a utility of the future. And actually, defining utility of the future, obviously, different people may have different definitions. But to us, I think it covers the whole supply chain, because we basically do generation, we do transmission, distribution, we do customer service. To be a utility of the future, we have to look at across the supply chain, how we can improve, optimize our operation, how we can be a trusted partner of our customer, providing, for example, bespoke services, so as to fulfill their needs. So I think we are all aligned, and we have already started the transformation.
Well, thank you, TK, and thank you for promoting our session 4, talking about innovation and transformation. So for the audience who are interested in that topic, please stay tuned in the afternoon. Now, Maggie, Peter Becker, in his presentation, of course, in Vision 2050 report, they talk about the challenges we are facing, not just climate emergency, but also nature loss and inequality. And of course, repeatedly in his presentation, he mentioned the importance of resilience and also regeneration. Now, based on your experience and your work with other business partners, not just in Hong Kong, but in Asia perhaps, how important it is to shift business focus on characteristics such as diversity and adaptability, and why should company instill regenerative thinking?
And thank you. I think the COVID-19 of the last 18 months, 2 years, has really brought almost the world attention to the shift to regeneration, to resilience, sustainability, climate change. They've all come right to the top of everybody's list. There's no way now that people can argue you have to put it back, I think. And it does take board decisions to make big companies particularly, and smaller companies like ours, really take up the challenge to get people to pick this up and start to work on it. There's a lot of business risk attached to trying to turn around ideas. There's quite a lot of big companies who haven't yet realised that it's not just economic, not just social, not just environmental impact, that you've got to look at it across the company and the various services it provides. I've actually been on the side of sustainability, climate change, probably for about the last 10 or 11 years. And in lots of ways, that has very much prepared me for what's been happening over the last couple of years. Certainly, as far as Hong Kong's concerned, and I think what Hong Kong happens here and what we think are important here really does reflect itself across a large number of countries in Asia, is that the biggest impact will be on not just residential, although in Hong Kong we have the problems of very short residential on the number of people looking for it, but we also see the climate risk, which is now a core component of long-term risk and hence long-term value. Our advice to clients planning office, retail, event spaces, etc., is not you really should consider, but you really must consider. And this is something that is taking a bit of time to get to some boards' attention. However, the number of particular things people need to look at is the site. It goes right back to the beginning, really. You can't just manage probably with the physical assets that you're running things with, because there are things that actually run alongside that and follow up on the type of site and the sort of reaction from the climate change that we're going to get to those sites. Because I think even in Hong Kong, while we have a rule that says you must look at a metre higher than where the water, the sea level, comes up to at the moment, I really don't think I've seen anything that's got a great deal of 1 metre rise in sight. So there's that to take into consideration. Eco-friendly design, we need to remember. We also need to look at building information, measurement, and internet project communication centres. All these things that for the bigger developments really are essential if we're going to be able to run them properly with the way the climate change is going to progress. We need to adopt sustainable working environments for all, and that's where the diversity, biodiversity, and regenerative thinking really needs to come along. We do need to be very fair, not just to our own employees, but all the people who live in the areas which we're building for, because we come from the other side of the house. We're advising companies on what they should do to make life better for the people they're providing these services to. Not just better for their company, which it may well be, but for the other people who actually use and consume the goods that they're producing. So it's really yes, it's good it's happened now. I'm very glad to see some of the targets that have been set for 2030, because we know we're behind with some of them if we're going to keep up with what we need to keep up with. We need a much more equal way of living. We don't really want to see much more racial division. We don't really want to see much more social division amongst the various countries in the world. There is a much better way to live. We need to focus on green financing, and it's out there, and I'm sure we've got a couple of things on it today. But we also need to feature on all the things that people think of when they think of climate change. We need renewable energy, we need efficient water management, we need cooling and heating systems. All these things that really do work and which will clean the air, absorb the waste, both of which we have problems with in Hong Kong, and provide really a better living standard for the general population up to 2050, which I'm sure we won't have reached it all by then, but at least we should be more on the way by then. We've got things like car parking. You mentioned EV. We've got to get people into EVs and not just thinking they can manage with petrol engines. There's flat roofs. You need to have greenery on your roof so people can go out into the fresh air. It doesn't really matter if we're very cramped in where we live, as long as we've got open air to go to and our kids can go outside as well. We need to plan for all the things that come into the Sustainable Development List. And I don't think that's over complicated. I think it's just managed to think of all the things on the ESG pattern that we're going to have to adopt, and that includes climate change, of course, so that we can have a better world by not only 2030, but it should be well improved by then, but also by 2050.
Well, thank you, Maggie. I think most people would agree with your views, and the question is how are we going to put that into action?
Absolutely.
Now, I've received quite a few questions, and one of the questions actually asks, do you see that downstream consumers should be engaged more, or do you feel that consumers need not be bothered and as industry continuously provide the most sustainable product or services without asking consumer and their expectation? Now, this ties in very well with my last question to the panelists. That's about shareholder capitalism versus stakeholder capitalism. Yeah. So what's your view about this kind of a debate? And can you share any examples from your business where creation of shared value for stakeholders actually take precedence over business growth and profit making? So maybe I will start with Kevin.
Yeah. I think to tie to the first part of the question, you don't choose your customers choose you. They have a choice.
You can always lose them.
And they will make, the younger generation of customers are making more informed decisions, not based just on price, but about how you behave as a business. And it's not just the customers, but your employees will choose whether they want to work with you. And look at the performance in a very different light to maybe compared to 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So that's the first part. In terms of the stakeholder versus shareholder capitalism, in the context of Jardines, I don't think that it's as clear as it's a new emergence of stakeholder. It's always been about stakeholder capitalism. Our people, our customers, our employees have always been very important to us. The way we respect the jurisdictions in which we work, they give us the permission to work in those jurisdictions, and you cannot be around for the long term if you have a very short-sighted view. And so for us, it is always about the long term. And I think if we draw some learning from the pandemic situation, last year in our own business, we made a decision to continue with a full complement of recruitment across all of our geographies. Different geographies did get some government support, others did not, but we treated ourselves as a collective family of employees. And when we did things in one jurisdiction, we made sure that things were done in another jurisdiction. We were fair, because our viewpoint was the view of the business in terms of its performance now will not be about what we do now, it will be reflected in the future. And so again, that conversation happened at board level, and then we consulted with people in the business. What do you want? What would you like us to do? And we've got similar conversations running on that. And that conversation is very particular. It's last year, it's in our very short-term memory. But there have no doubt been countless conversations over the decades that have happened. Yeah. And that's what will make us set for future success. But now with sustainability and how we treat the climate will be front and center of all of those conversations that happen.
Sure, thank you, Kevin. TK?
Thank you. Now, I think, as CLP, because we are doing electricity business, basically is, I would say, closely linked with everybody's daily lives. So whenever, whatever we do, we have to strike a balance between, on one hand, the electricity supply has to be very reliable, as we have been enjoying. It has to be environmentally acceptable, and also at a reasonable cost to our customer. So with that, in mind, basically, what we have been doing is to strike such a balance. And this means that we have been always taking our stakeholders' consideration into account. So I would say, actually, we have been operating the business in this so-called stakeholder, I would say, under this so-called stakeholder capitalism regime. And to CLP, I think one example I would say is that over the years, we have been promoting energy efficiency. I think maybe you can hardly find another business that on one hand, we are basically operating our business. On the other hand, we ask our customer to consume less. But we take a long-term view. We think that things that are good for our customer would be good for us and also for the industry. And we want to have a sustainable business serving our customer from generation to the next. I think that gives a good example. And another example I would quickly quote is, for example, we have launched the feed-in tariff scheme, which basically involves all our customers to develop renewable energy. Just like what Margaret mentioned, we have to do a lot more renewable energy, despite the fact that we may not have sufficient resources in Hong Kong, but we just try our best. And that also goes back to the point that Simon, you mentioned about whether we should involve our customer. To us, it's definitely yes. Climate change is everybody's job, and we have to involve everybody in order to make a success.
Okay, thank you, TK. We have 1 more minute, so Maggie, what's your last thought?
Probably wouldn't surprise you. If there's a choice, I would really rather take stakeholder choice than I would shareholder choice. I think that is where the divisions would come if you happen to work for the sort of company where what you're producing is not necessarily the only source for the consumer that is consuming it. I think that we all have to recognise that if we're going to get to the 2050 zero net carbon, which we're all aiming for, it's going to be a cost. And we're not going to be able to offer all the services or all the goods or the manufacturing goods that we'd like to be able to offer if we don't face up to the fact that it's going to cost more and people are going to have to pay for it. And reorganise their life in such a way that they can do without those goods and can find an alternative.
Right.
But that's where it comes to, I'm afraid.
All right, okay. Wow, such a great way to start today's conference, and I think we have set the scene for the rest of the day. Thank you once again for our 3 distinguished business leaders, TK, Maggie, and Kevin, for sharing your thoughts. It's a privilege to be speaking to you this morning. And for the rest of the day, we have other interesting sessions that awaits you. So please stay tuned. With that, I will hand it over back to Mark, our MC.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to our speakers and moderator for an insightful discussion, offering diverse perspectives concerning the setting of new priorities for businesses, especially in the midst of a pandemic. Thank you once again. And this brings us to the end of the first session. And before we move on to the second session, we'll have a short break now. Plenary 2 will start after the break at 10:20. Thank you.